Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Creative Lifescaping with me, Dr. Caroline Brookfield. And every week I bring on people who aren't necessarily considered in a creative role, but who use their creativity every day or have something to say about creativity to make their life better. So I am so thrilled to bring you Kerryn Fewster this week. I am a bit of a fangirl of Kerryn's work. She has spent over 20 years working with leading Australian and global businesses in the area of transformation, leadership development, coaching, and embedding culture change programs, enabling businesses to flourish and perform. She's a trusted confidant for leaders across diverse industries and is a firm believer in creating a workplace where people are committed, developed, and advocates for their organization. Kerryn's talent for balancing straight talking and humor ensures she adds true value to organizations. And that's what I love about Kerryn is her sense of humor. I'm going to bring Kerryn on now. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we connected, Kerryn, over my fan of your research in tolerance of ambiguity, which blew me away. So I'm so excited to talk to you about your work in organizations and with ambiguity today and how that relates to creativity, really.
Oh, it fundamentally does. And I guess that must be nearly 2 years ago that we first connected. And and there's been obviously some developments, and the world turned upside down in that time frame as well. So there's been lots of ambiguity. So it should be a good chat.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic. I think we connected before COVID, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
yeah,
sure of it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And what I loved about this idea of tolerance of ambiguity is something I hadn't heard of before. And your work particularly spoke to me because it was very applied and, it was research based, but it also had tangible things for people to do, which we're going to get to. But I want to know a little bit about you, a little bit about you. Like, what did you want to be when you were little, and how did you become an expert on change and transformation and ambiguity?
Gosh, when I was little, I'm in Australia, and I grew up down the bottom part of Australia where it's cooler, in Melbourne, and I was once in the city with mum and my sisters and my brother and my cousins, and daytime television came past, and we were picked out to be interviewed, and it was like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And at that time, I had this fascination with, being the people who are able to, tap away and type. And I thought I wanted to do something, that would involve computers because I liked the idea of tapping. I'm the least, oh, probably not the least computer literate person, but that certainly did not arise. But the thing was funny. I had this massive, I was like 8, big girl, and had this massive knots of hair and knots in my hair. And so I'm holding my hair like this, and the interviewer said, "Would you like to be a hairdresser?" And I remember thinking at the time, "Oh no, gosh, I hope he can't see my hair." And I realized, of course, he was just being facetious because you could
Oh,
see this little chubby little round girl in a corduroy matching outfit with lots of knots in her hair. So I thought that's what I wanted to be. I was so wrong from that. But then we moved up to Queensland, which is much warmer at the top end here, and went to school up here. And that's when I finished secondary school, I went into university to study primary school teaching. And again, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I'm not quite sure how that happened. But I went to London for a couple of years, and I was a teacher over in London for a couple of years. I've never taught in Australia. So I did Australians and New Zealanders from the bottom end of the southern hemisphere, we very typically spend a couple of years abroad, which is
yeah.
what's so disappointing for people who are 20 these days who just cannot do that. So
Mhm.
yeah, I did that for a bit. So it was actually a really good foundation for what I do now, because
Mhm.
I talk to people all day long, and I have to have a degree of organisation. I have to have a focus on the conversation and what the outcome should be. So, unbeknownst to me, it was probably quite a good undergraduate to do before I went on and studied more in the human resources and masters of business area. So, yeah,
That's fantastic. I just have this image of you as a little girl with knots in your hair, and that's
yeah,
want to be a hairdresser. Poof.
yeah,
No.
exactly. Yeah,
Can you imagine now
and
if
as
they
you can
said
see,
that?
I haven't really evolved in that space either. It just keeps my head warm, this hair, so that's it.
That's fantastic. And so do you like tell me a little bit about creativity in business. So is creativity a bad word in business?
So a lot of the clients we work across lots of industries, finance, utilities, construction, entertainment. So in entertainment, no. I think it's still a bit of a difficult word for people to adapt to. It's around let's get creative, let's think differently. And people tend to go, oh God, I'm not a creative person. I don't
Mm.
have ideas. I can't just go bing like that. So I think that it still is a challenging word to have. And I think that, one of the things I said to you, Carolyn, when we first met was I'm yet to meet a chief creativity officer. And 2 years on, I'm still yet to meet one. And
Mm.
yet, we get chief happiness officers and obviously, chief people and culture and those type of things. But I think the concept, you get chief transformational change,
Mhm.
but I think the concept of creativity is still a bit too, colors and crocheting and those type of things, and it's a bit tricky for people.
Yeah, and that you hit on a really important thing from my perspective that I see is this idea that creativity is artistic, and
Yeah.
this idea that I'm not creative. Do you think everybody
Yes.
is creative to some capacity? And how do you define creativity?
Uh, yeah, so I think creativity is your ability to think differently, to see a problem, to experience a situation you've not been in, and to be able to, churn the gears in your head to go, how do I do this differently? I need to find a new way out. So I think everyone definitely has got the capacity to be creative. We use the terminology of think differently when our research when we're going through the process, the idea of talking about like one of the most highly correlated habits to getting more comfortable with ambiguity is to get creative.
Mm.
The concept of speaking to engineers who are very structured, or lawyers or accountants, let's get creative. And in our client base, generally speaking, they're male, they're 45 to 65, and that's not suggesting that they can't be creative, but there's a general concept, I think, of the more diligent style of working and the more disciplined and expected style of working. So the concept of creativity is, let's get in a room with lots of color and create post-it notes and loud pens and moving really fast. And that's great. Yes, we can do that. And there's a time and place for that. But the other way is just sort of saying, I've not seen this problem before. I don't know how to navigate my way through it. What I do know is if I try and use my old way of thinking to solve this new problem, I'm not going to get anywhere. So I have to think differently. And so, long answer, I think that people all can be creative. I think some are more naturally attuned to it, and I do think it's still a bit of a difficult word in quite a few industries.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is for people who are resistant to that creativity, the idea that I say it's like frivolous and it's for grandmas and kids, like that painting and macrame. It sounds like
Yeah,
you're saying to meet people where they are, right? And see where, like you said, if you bring in a bunch of paints and some Sharpies and Post-it notes to a group that's never done that before, it's probably putting them too far out of where they think it's going to function for them as well, I would guess.
yeah, definitely, definitely. It honestly, I mean, we even know that from people with the preference for extroversion and introversion. You say to a bunch of introverts, let's get brainstorming, and they'd rather lose their left foot. Like, don't do that to me. Give me some time to think about it, and I can get there, but that's not my comfortable space. So, making sure that there's lots of different ways for people to express their creativity and how to solve these big complex problems and at pace means that encouraging them to say, I'm going to find a different way. I'm just going to think about this from a different perspective.
Mhm.
That for me is fostering creativity, and I think that generally speaking we'll get better outcomes when we as an organization encourage that more so.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of brainstorming, the typical thing is somebody, a leader, or the loudest person in the room up at the whiteboard and everybody being forced to yell out
Yeah,
their ideas in a,
yeah,
15-minute brainstorming session. But it sounds like what
yeah.
you're saying, which is what I've heard as well, is that people have individual ways of expressing and acting on their curiosity. And if we try to force them to do it in a certain way, then obviously they'll be resistant to it. You know,
Yeah, because it just doesn't, I mean, to be creative, we want people to be comfortable. If you put somebody way out of their comfort zone, which ambiguity does for all of us, but then add on top of that and let's get crazy and go brainstorming, you're just going to break people. It's like, no, I don't want to get crazy. I actually just want to hide under a desk for a moment because I'm uncomfortable in all of these areas. So yeah, we've got to be cognizant of that and think about how you can get the best out of people for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. For anybody who's just joining us now, I'm chatting with Kerryn, who is a change management and ambiguity expert, and we are chatting about creativity and ambiguity at work. And I just love what you're saying about respecting people where they need to be. As for you're very true. Like if you throw someone in full on ambiguity and uncertainty, they're going to be very unlikely to think creatively because we're forced to go to status quo solutions. So is that, so tell me a little bit about the am I saying that right? The I am test and how that came about and how do you use that in your work to help organizations? I'm going to put your website up here so people can find it.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so about so I've got two companies. Adaptive Minds is the one we're speaking about now, and my other organisation is called Change 2020, and that organisation is it's a consulting organisation, and we work in mergers and acquisition and change and transformation, and it's the third pillar around culture and leadership that really brought Adaptive Minds to life. So what we were finding is that leaders who we were working with through significant change programs were not really finding new and different ways to adapt to the pace and the complexity of change that was, evident. This is well before COVID. This is 4.5 years ago. It was really, the onset of Industry 4.0, globalization, digital transformation, all of these changes in organizations, and people were tending to stick to what they know. We're just going to keep doing it this way. But the world was different, and things were not the way they once were and how things seemed. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to understand why was it that some people seemed to be able to adapt to ambiguity better than others. And the whole concept of what ambiguity is, which it's unfamiliar, it's high levels of uncertainty. It's you're in a situation where you can't lean on past learnings to solve this current problem. It feels messy. People talk about the fog, the fog of ambiguity comes over you. It's a bit chaotic. And so we went to a university, Queensland University of Technology, and asked the researchers to help us better understand the answer to that question. So they then undertook an 18-month research program, and we're still in a research partnership with them. And so it was a global research, and the undertaking was to be very specific about the workplace. So your tolerance for ambiguity in work. So some of us will have a much higher tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty in our social and personal life. We really wanted to understand the workplace. And so that research was undertaken and it was benchmarked, and it's globally reliable and valid in terms of all the academic ticks that you need to get along the way, which has been really important. I can come out with 20 years of experience and say, look, this is what I think, but let's validate it with, with some rigor behind it, which is what we've definitely done. So the research then resulted in this assessment, which is called the indicator of ambiguity. And as you have got our website up there, there's a little free assessment you can do there. So it gives you it's the full assessment, but you get like a snapshot report. So you can click on that. It's a pink button there. It says get your free snapshot report today, I think. If you click on that, you go through the assessment and you'll get a high level report back. And what's brilliant about that is that it's a moment in time. It doesn't say you're broken. It doesn't say you can't improve. What it does is say, this is where you are at the moment. And it's got three dimensions. So how comfortable you are with ambiguity, your desire for challenging work. So, do you look for unique and novel, or do you look for more routine orientated work? And the third criteria is managing the uncertainty. So what do you do when you've got all that uncertainty? Are you somebody who leads from the front, or are you somebody who, is pulling out their hair? Do you get highly stressed? You become anxious? Or do you go quite into a way of being almost methodical about step 1, step 2, step 3? And so as a result of that, you get a snapshot of your results. And there's a number of individual elements as well. So it's more detailed than just the dimensions. It gives you even more granular information. And it's a moment in time that says this is where you are, and then we coach against that, and we run workshops, etc., so people have a better understanding of that. And then the second part of the research program that we undertook in partnership with the university was to understand the so what. So what do I do? I've got this data, and the so what resulted in a number of habits, which are highly correlated with building your tolerance for ambiguity. And so again, that's part of the coaching program, and so it's part of the major change programs that we use with that data.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I think on your website, you also have kind of some of the habits listed. So for those who are
Yeah,
interested, think differently as one of the habits, which is one of the, like
that's
how
right.
we kind of, the stars align for us to meet, is this idea of
That's right.
creativity being tolerant to ambiguity. So what makes people avoid ambiguity, and like how does that affect them? And like why are organizations coming to you saying we need to fix this ambiguity problem? Like what does it look like?
Yeah, so no organisation's ever come to us and said we need to fix this ambiguity problem, and the reason being is that, generally speaking, people think they're pretty good at tolerating ambiguity. You know, the research and data says that less than 10% of people have got this high tolerance or clear tolerance, sorry, for ambiguity, and what it basically is people see signs of we're just not getting through, like we are not achieving our significant transformational projects, or we said, the resistance feels higher than it's ever felt before, or there's this general level of indecisiveness. There's all these type of indicators as opposed to come and help us sort out our ambiguity. The reason I guess that people why do they avoid it was your question. Because it doesn't feel safe. It actually feels really ordinary. Our brains crave certainty. We're better, much better when we know what's going on. It takes up less brain matter energy. We are routine based creatures if we can be, and suddenly something comes from left field and absolutely knocks you over, and you're thinking, I don't know how to operate in this space. And it's that whole concept of the amygdala hijack. So our emotions are taken over, or our emotions take over us, and fear and anxiety is right heightened, and we're not great in that space either. We become quite it's challenging for us, it's challenging for others. And what we were seeing is that leaders would become, they were almost going back to being the directional and I will tell leadership, as opposed to the curious leader and the leader that's empowering others and that type of thing. So the reason to avoid it is because it feels really ordinary. No one wants to feel out of control. Ultimately, the sense of saying, I can control what's going on around me. I think the sooner people have that light bulb moment that no, you cannot, but what you can do is control how you respond to all the uncertainty. That's like it just lifts people, because they were so busy trying to look at what I can control. And I say to clients all the time, or anyone, tell me what you're absolutely sure of, what you're definitely certain of at this moment in time. And very few, I mean, I can say, well, the sun will come up, and here it is, 7 a.m. Here, and it's the following day here in Australia. The sun's going to come up in Canada tomorrow, I can tell you, because it's up here. So that I'm certain of. But I'm not certain of a great deal of other things today. But the thing is, I know that even if I get, if something happens that's unexpected, or it's painful, or it's difficult, or it's frustrating, I do know that I am equipped with the ability to find a way to control myself, my response to that. And I think that's key for people.
Yeah, and one of the things that you really struck me about one of our previous conversations with this idea of one of the habits, or I don't know, that the foundations for helping ambiguity is this idea of mastering mindfulness. And I came to you with a question because I'd read articles saying that mindfulness, focused attention, is negatively correlated with divergent thinking, because divergent is like thinking of all the things, and focused attention is thinking on one thing. But tell me if you remember,
Yes.
or I'm sure you do, but what you told me about how mindfulness can help creativity and help master this ambiguity, which kind of dovetails to what you were just saying.
Well, the concept of mindfulness is to still the noise around you, and push back on all the competing factors that is taking your attention and often causing this angst and uncertainty and high levels of distraction. So it's get very present in the moment, take in what you know, find a way to calm yourself down, so that you are then able to, if you need to respond, to kick into gear like your prefrontal cortex, so you can make a more logical decision how you'll move forward. when we're heightened and taken over by all of our emotions, it's very, very difficult for us to find a way forward. And we know it ourselves. If you're really tired, or you've had a pretty rough week, or the kids driving you insane, we're less tolerant of that, and our emotions are not so great. And we might say something, we think, gosh, I really wish I could get that one back in, but it's gone, it's out there. And we're not always our best self. So when we're in a workplace or a work environment, we might try to often be our best self, but all of that's still competing with us. So the concept of stilling yourself and being present, to try and calm yourself down, enables you to see more clearly about what's going on, and take away some of the drama and the fear associated with all that of uncertainty. So that's why, of all the habits, that is the highest correlated habit towards building your tolerance for ambiguity. So it's that one, and then think differently, or creativity is number 2.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I love the way you explained how they all fit together so well, like to be in that space. And before we talk about those 3 things, because I want to talk about resilience and how that fits with think differently and mindfulness. But first, I wanted to ask, because I find, and I'm learning, we're all work in progress, but I think so many people are like the way I naturally am, which is I don't recognize when I'm in uncertainty. I often, the emotions, like you say, I don't think, oh, I'm feeling uncertain here. I feel certain. I feel like I know the answer and you're wrong, or this is what we need to do. So how do you, and with the research on how even exposure to ambiguity that we don't consciously register affects our decisions, how would you suggest someone back up and actually identify when they're feeling uncertain or in ambiguity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's probably one of the really big challenges, is that we're often a fair way down the track before we realize, this is actually what's going on. Like, I have a personal experience right now. So we recently had a week's holiday and went off. There's a little island off Brisbane here, which is lovely, and having a great time on the beach. And my son, who's 20, he came over for one night. And when he came back to Brisbane, realised we'd been broken into, and that the car was stolen, our passports. Of course, we don't need passports at the moment, but still, I'd like to know I had them, and jewelry and shoes. And so there's a real sense of invasion. And that's totally outside of my control. But when he rang me and I'm sitting on the beach, I was incredibly calm. And I'm just like, well, mate, make sure there's no one in the house. What's happened? Da, da, da. Don't touch anything. Call the police. And I rang my sister. Can you go over and, check on him, have a cup of tea or have a beer, whatever he needs, just be with him for a moment. And so my girlfriends were on the beach with me, and they said, you're so calm. And I said, I went into this process of making sure we went through what had to happen. Probably, a few days later, I could feel the emotion associated with it, this sense of invasion, this sense of people who have stolen things from me that mean a lot to me, that mean nothing to them. That this is my family home where people should be safe. And so I felt it later. And what I've noticed is that I am, so I had to go through the process, filling in all the forms and everything. And I'm finding that hard to do. Now, it's not intelligently hard to do. It's hard to do because I can't clear my head. I can't, at the moment I'm just trying, because there is lots of uncertainty around. I can't remember all my bits of jewelry. I do like my shiny things. So, bits and pieces I can't remember. And so the emotions are driving a behavior, which is preventing me from getting to that place of certainty. What I know I need to do is just finish the paperwork and send it off so that I can get it out of here for a little while, and then I'll deal with the next step. So it's probably taken me 3 or 4 days to realize that the emotions have grabbed me in a different way, which has then impacted my ability to do what I need to do, which is submit the claim and get it over and done with. And so, how do we know? Well, generally speaking, in a workplace, you'll get signs from others, so other people might be sort of going, let's just find a way to move forward. You might also find that you are highly indecisive. You have that sense of feeling stuck, that you can't move forward, you can't move back, left or right, and you really don't know. You can have that sense of being absolutely overwhelmed. And some people will automatically think that's high levels of stress, and it often is very closely attributed to stress. But it's where there's that lack of clarity, like I can't see which way to go, which is exactly with me that I've found. I'm going, well, do I start listing, the pieces of jewelry, or the fact that my car, they stole both sets of car keys, and the car keys have to come from Germany, 6 to 12 weeks. So like, I can't even, so what do I do with that? All of those, and they're things that well outside of my control. But what I can do is say, rather than being overwhelmed by it, take one step forward to resolve what you can resolve. And that's the challenge with ambiguity, is that we might be in it for a fair period of time before we go, okay, I'm not my best self. I'm not progressing. I'm feeling pretty ordinary. And then probably because I immersed myself in this space, I know what I'm doing now. So now I'm going, all right, Kerryn, get yourself sorted. Just get the list out of your head, and that will help you to progress forward.
Yeah, well, it kind of sounds a little bit like mindfulness, like just what is the next thing? Like, what is this immediate thing I need to do? Right. And I think one thing that strikes me about what you're saying is, and what I'm understanding hearing you say, is that you need time, like that you need time to process, like that you need to give yourself some grace and space. Is that what you were saying about, like, knowing the emotions are taking over?
Absolutely. And I like that term, grace and space. And look, I'm a screaming extrovert. So everything I do, I think out there, I speak out there, do all of that. But even I, at a 30 on MBTI of extroversion, need time to go, okay, what do I need to do to process? And one of the other habits is around focus, which you mentioned before, that mindfulness, is almost opposite to divergent thinking. Well, one of the habits is focus, which is, again, not about divergent thinking, but what it is about is saying, what's within your space, your box now, that you can do something about. Get very, very focused. And even if it's dedicate 5 minutes, dedicate 15 minutes, whatever it might be, but do that thing. What that does is it helps to lower the anxiety and the stress we've got around everything else that's uncertain that's going on. So that closer links as well to that, mindfulness, that, okay, just be very clear, be very present. Now, from a focus perspective, but do something in that time. Get my list done. And then that's one less thing. Now, I have to come back to that. There's no doubt about it. But at the moment, implementing those sort of habits and ways of thinking will help to progress through what is uncertain and chaotic and emotional. And nearly all change, is emotional. People very rarely, will embrace the idea of, people will tell me all the time, oh gosh, I love change. I love the variety. That's if they're in control of it. That's if they feel like they're leading that change. When change happens to them, there's a lot less love, a lot less enthusiasm. So, that's kind of what we do for a living, is try to help people get a bit enthusiastic, or at least get curious about it. So, there's a difference between variety of life and change. And if I welcome change into my life that I lead, then life's pretty good. This is and that gives me variety, and I'm pretty happy. But if it's about, here's another major restructure, there's an acquisition, we're putting in yet another new system, we're relocating an organization, things like that, that's variety in its truest sense, because we're creating, we're switching things up again. But I don't like it because I didn't want it, and I'm not leading it, and I'm out of control. So there's difference in there.
Yeah, that's a key difference if you're choosing it, because people say, like, variety is the spice of life. But yeah, that's if you're choosing the menu, not if someone else is serving you,
exactly.
a la carte or whatever.
That's right.
What's that word? No, the one where you don't get to choose the menu. Plat fixe, I think, is the French word, like they call it, where you just go and they serve you whatever they serve you, and you get what you get. So, yeah, that makes sense. And one of the things that
one of my favorite ways to eat, actually.
What's that?
One of my favorite ways to eat. I love it when the food's brought to you.
Yeah, and you don't have to decide.
Yeah, it's great.
I want all the things.
Yeah, exactly. But help me not to have all of them. So you give me what you think I should have.
Yeah, exactly. My husband, a little tangent, my husband drives him crazy because we'll be at a restaurant, and he hates it when I do this. I do it every time. I'll be like, I can't decide between the steak, the risotto, or the fish. And my husband's like, And the server's like, they're all very different. I'm like, well, but is there one that's really popular? Like, I'm okay with any of them, but if one of them is like the house specialty, and he's very cynical, he just thinks they'll tell me that most expensive thing. So,
well, I've gone as far as to saying sometimes if I can't decide between two, I'll say to the waitress or the waiter, you decide and just bring it back to me. But if it's steak, it's got to be rare, and if it's this,
yeah,
but you decide. So
yeah.
it's a bit of a treat when it arrives.
That's amazing. I love that. And it reminds me, so with with the book that I'm launching in December and doing these series, I also do these dares every week. So for people to get out of their comfort zone and embrace ambiguity. And ambiguity was the word for September. And one of the things I challenged them to do was to go to the coffee shop and just tell the barista, like, get me something. And so I did that. They didn't want me to video. I totally understand. And I said to her, just pick me something. And she was horrified. She said, what do you mean pick you something? I said, just pick me anything. It's a dare. Like I told her, like, this is just, a fun thing I'm doing. Don't worry about what you pick. She's like, well, hot or cold? And I was like, anything. And the panic. And she ended up giving me the drink I always get anyway, which is so, like, she didn't know me. Right. She didn't know that's my order, but it was just funny. So I was like, anyway. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? That's a little bit of ambiguity that you're in charge of. And in some ways, but relinquishing control within a construct that you're, they're not going to bring you crickets, right?
Yeah, ideally not. But the thing that's great about that also is that speaks to the opportunity in ambiguity. So say if they had have bought you, a fresh juice that you never have, and then you find something new and you go, oh gosh, that's beautiful. I love that. Or you have, you push yourself a bit harder and you actually do have fish when you normally, your traditional sort of meat stuff. And then you've got a, new, I mean, I know this is very basic and it's about the palate, but it applies to other areas as well. So when someone gives you the opportunity to be a part of a project, you learn something new and suddenly you realize that actually I don't need to be purely in this space. I'm really interested in, the way the technology works or how that member experience is heightened through that way of service or whatever it might be. If you're given the opportunities and you're prepared to jump into them, there's tremendous opportunity in, the chaos of the unknown.
Yes, I love that. I mean, saying yes to things that lead you on a path that you never would have imagined. And I think Steve Jobs said you can't link the dots going forward, only backwards, right? So if you want to live a fulfilling life and, explore all of the opportunities and all of the strengths you might not even know you have to start saying yes to things and feeling that discomfort, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, I wanted to ask, I know we're a little bit over time, but you said you were okay for time. So this is my show, so I'm going to keep going if you're okay to keep, because I really wanted to ask you one more question about the impact, because we've had a number of people on the podcast talking about, personal benefits from creativity and what are the aspects of creativity that make them happy. And can you speak a little bit to this intersection, if there is one, between creativity or thinking differently and resilience and tolerance of ambiguity? Because I feel like they're all highly correlated in the work that you did with the University of Queensland.
Absolutely. The personal well-being, the higher your tolerance for ambiguity is, the higher your level of well-being is. And if you're mentally in a great place, you're much more open to new ideas, new opportunities, things like that. If you are stressed and anxious, which is, just exacerbated by more uncertainty, then we're not open like that. We can't make decisions very well. We can't move forward. We can't make a difference. So they are highly, highly connected. And not only that, people's performance is heightened if their tolerance for ambiguity is higher. So all the data tells us, build your tolerance for ambiguity, learn to get comfortable in that space. Your performance increases and your sense of well-being is significantly improved. And it's the application of saying, I'm in a different world. I mean, we haven't even mentioned the pandemic. Obviously, as a result of what has happened globally over the last 2 years, the amazing and remarkable stories of resilience and capacity to change and adapt and just say, my business model is not working anymore. Like here in Australia at the moment, we've unfortunately had another fairly significant wave come through, particularly in Victoria and New South Wales. And, you know, our people in Victoria over the last 2 years have had in excess of, I think it's close to 250 days of lockdown, which is just, you know, it's stifling. And all my friends and family, they're, you know, but what they're managing to do to move forward and, you know, create and have that sense of resilience. So they're homeschooling, they're working for themselves, they're, you know, they're just, I've got one girlfriend at the moment, there's a massive renovation happening outside of her house as well. And she's just like she just burst out laughing and then slightly into tears. She said, I've got these 2 kids inside, my husband's in, it's a little home, and there's this renovation that, I mean, it's beyond a renovation. It's like you know, it's an intrusion of buildings happening outside. And so, you know, how do you find your way through? And it is about saying, you know, what's that one step that I'm going to take forward? And so they both actually, her and her husband, working, they're in marketing and on branding, so they're in their creative area in terms of what we consider to be the traditional creative area. So you know, they're finding their way through navigating all this uncertainty with trying to have some variety for the kids in terms of how they do homeschooling. Even just going, walking in different directions for their hour of exercise a day and having that different coffee or whatever they might be able to do. But the intersection of tolerance for ambiguity, performance, resilience, and well-being, it is really, really significant. If we can accept that we are in a world that is going to only continually change, the pace, the complexity, the uncertainties, that's not going away. So the moment we go, okay, that's where we are. Like when I hear people say, look, at the moment, things are a little bit challenging, I say to them, how is that moment different to 2 months ago? And what needs to be different to make this moment different in 2 months? 99.9% of the time, there is no response to that. And it's not because I'm clever with my question, it's because this is the world we're in and we can't control that. So firstly, realize that you can't control all those external factors. Once you get comfortable with that, then that ideally helps you know, well, I have got some areas though, which is what I was saying at the beginning, I can control me. That's not easy. It's not oh, hang on, I'm uncertain, I'll just control my emotions. It takes some time, it takes some effort. But once we've got that awareness, that helps us with our sense of well-being. It feels easier. You know, you take that deep breath and you think, okay, I can just calm myself down for a moment. And then again, that of course helps us to say one step further, or today's a static day and that's okay, but I'm not going backwards, or I'm not lying down. Today, I'm still going to do something. So understanding that workplaces and individuals, you know, they build their sense of resilience. We're not born with it. This is something that, you know, is adapted. And in actual fact, last year at the height of COVID, for certainly our part of the world, when the whole concept of, oh, let's build resilience, and resilience is all about bouncing back, you know, we ran a series of programs called Bounce Forward. And the reason being is that we're not going back. In my firm belief, we are not going back. And I also say to organizations and leaders, you know, you weren't loving the culture in the past. Why do you want to bounce back to that? Let's bounce forward and find something new. And again, it's like taking that breath and being brave and courageous, which is another one of the habits, and saying, I don't know where we're going necessarily. I don't know how we're going to get there necessarily, but I do know that standing still is not an option for us. And so that helps people to go, okay, we're going to go one step further. I can see a bit of a pathway. I've got a bit of clarity. And that's probably the other thing I talk to leaders about all the time is don't promise certainty because you can't give it, but you can absolutely provide clarity. So give people clarity over their role, what their expectations, where they're working from home, from the office, what that looks like. Even if it's only a week out, give people as much clarity as you can. That lowers their levels of anxiety around uncertainty, and then we're able to perform and progress forward. So, you know, I think first and foremost, recognize we can't control the uncertainty. Step into it, find out what you can control, which is ultimately just how you respond to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we can't control the environment, only how we respond to it. And I really love that. Clarity beats certainty.
Yeah.
It does, right?
Because, well, one you can work on, one you can actually deliver on, the other you can't.
Yeah.
And regardless of how many people say, well, just tell me what's going on. Well, I need to know this. Know that our brains are crafted in a way or created in a way that require and demand certainty. The world we live in says, yeah, but you know what? No, we're not giving that to you. So we've got to use the other parts of our brain and say,
except we seek it every day in a method that we
Yeah.
never had before. Like we can
That's
seek
right.
certainty even if it's the wrong answer. So it's like we're feeding that addiction with some false,
All the time.
solution, right? So
That's right. That's totally right. Yes, I want the answer. Ask Siri, ask Google, whatever it might be, you know. So when you and I were growing up, we couldn't ask either of them. We didn't have that sort of concept. So you had to find a way. I mean, I think it was a Britannica encyclopedias, and you know, that once they're printed, I don't even know how they stayed relevant beyond 12 months, honestly. You know, they were printed and they were beautiful and leather bound and carefully you could go through them. We'd go into the sunken lounge in mum and dad's house in Melbourne and very carefully touch these beautiful books and go through the thin pages. uh, you know, and we had them for 10 years as though they were relevant, and now you know, data and documents are updated. Oh, I can't believe I ever passed an exam. So yeah, it was just a different way of doing things.
yeah, well, this has been well, we have to end with the truth. So I'm going to show your LinkedIn profile here for anybody who wants to connect with Kerryn. You can find her at Adaptic Minds, or here's her LinkedIn profile. We'll tag you. This is a recording because the time changed, but when we go with this video, we'll tag Kerryn in it so you can find her that way too. But tell me a story where you chose truth because they were in the truth or dare section. So nobody choose. I've had like 2 people choose the dare. I don't know. People think I'm going to make them do something embarrassing, I guess. So tell me a story about when you felt a little uncomfortable or embarrassed. We already heard the story about the hairdresser when you were a little girl.
It was funny. I totally forgot about that until you asked me about what I thought I wanted to be. Well, I was thinking about this. And I was thinking that it was about 3 years ago, and I was asked by a client to fly up to the Whitsundays, which is where the Barrier Reef is. As a client, I had to run a workshop, and I remember thinking, how good is this? This is great. And I was out the front of my house, so I had on white jeans and a nice little top because I was going I was going coastal, and I thought I had the look, some cool sunnies on, and I had my bag was on wheels, my little wheelie bag behind me, and I'm waiting out the front for the Uber. And I'm standing there chatting on the phone to my sister and waiting for the Uber to come past. And I don't live on a busy street, but there's houses around me, etc. And suddenly, from nowhere, like in Australia, we have unnecessarily large birds, and there's too much wildlife here, to be honest. But I was out front, and it was breeding season for magpies, and this magpie comes flying in and swoops at me. So I'm ducking, and then he comes straight back, or he, and swoops at me again. And as I'm moving, I'm falling backwards, fall over my bag behind me, smash my glasses, break my phone as the Uber swings in. And here I am, and I've ripped my great white jeans. There's a little rip in them now. And here I am thinking I've got it all together, and I finally made it because I'm getting paid to go to the Whitsundays to run a workshop because I've got this all sorted. And here I am like a total mess on my driveway, smashed glasses, broken phone, ripping my jeans, looking like I've been dragged behind a car. And of course, I have to go because I've got to get to the airport, and the flight's not going to wait for me. And so when I got to the airport, I even noticed a little bit of blood on my knee that had come through my white jeans. And it just made me laugh and thinking, don't get ahead of yourself. You haven't made anything. You look absolutely ridiculous. And it was just because you were swooped at by this big bird, or probably wasn't even that big. It was just a mum protecting her babies. And so it just brought me straight back down to life. And I realized it doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing. I'm just me. And it was embarrassing though, particularly because the Uber driver, he jumped out and said, "Oh my God, are you okay? You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to be cool. Yeah, I got it all together." But then when the blood came through my jeans, had to go and find some really cheap, ugly sunnies at the airport. And my beautiful phone was all smashed. So yeah. Anyway, it was lovely when I got there. So
Oh, well, I'm glad you were okay in the end. And it's funny,
right.
the humility of when you, and that's part of what I talk about with creativity is this fear of what everybody thinks, like you with the Uber driver. Like nobody really
Yeah.
cares that much about us anyway, but we're so worried about it. And it's just like, you are doing these incredible things in the world. You've got this assessment, you're published, all these amazing things you do. And yet, you're embarrassed because some Uber driver saw you
Yeah.
like fall down, right? So I love it. And I think you're fantastic. So thank you so much for joining me, Kerryn. Please check
Oh,
out
thank
the
you.
free snapshot assessment, adapticminds.com. And I was one of the 10%. I am tolerant of ambiguity, but what I loved about the assessment is that it showed me my weak spots when I'm taking other people with me through that ambiguity. So I'm very
Yeah.
very conscious of that now that we did that together. And thank you for that. So
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, and I encourage people to do it. And then say it's a summary report, but it gives you enough good data. And it's been a lovely way for me to start my Friday. It's been 7 a.m. kicking off here, and it's beautiful weather. We've got a great weekend ahead. So you've this conversation has been really lovely and energetic for me. So thank you
oh,
so much for
thank you.
including me in your program.
Thank you so much. It's my incredible honor. I could do this for another 2 more hours. I have so many other things to talk to you about, but we'll end it there, and we can connect through. If you want to connect with Kerryn with her work through change and
Please do.
transformation and ambiguity, she's an amazing resource. And if I could, I would send you some bear spray to spray at your,
Yeah.
your magpies, because that'll stop them in their tracks.
Absolutely. I was thinking, I thought, we've got we don't have bears, but we got ridiculously oversized lizards and snakes and spiders, and then really, really protective birds as well. Yeah. So we've got a bit of a mixture down here.
The ambiguity of the animal kingdom.
Indeed. That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Kerryn. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much. See you
Thank you.
later.